Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is Nick with Idaho Up, and today we're going to be kicking off video number 3 of our 4-part video series. If you missed the first 2 videos, I'll put a link to the playlist right here, so make sure you go check those out. Today we're going to be installing a backup camera and a forward-facing camera, and we're going to be discussing 3 camera options, including one that you should definitely stay away from when considering it for your C6. I'm also going to show you where 3 grounding points are on the Corvette, 2 under the front of the hood where the engine is, and 1 near the back of the car, and I'm also going to show you how to put a hole through the firewall. Again, if you need to get caught up, make sure you go back and check out video number 1 and video number 2, and if these videos are helping you out, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into this. In our last video, I told you why you should stay away from the JVC head unit. In this video, I'm going to tell you why you should avoid the Crux and Boyo cameras for forward-facing or backup cameras on your C6. The goal I had with my car was to install some cameras that had a clean look and were as close to looking as stock as possible while still having a really good resolution on the screen on the other side. And it took me going through 3 different types of cameras before I decided on the one camera that was the best for both the front and the rear of the C6. So listen up, because I'm potentially about to save you some money, and I'm definitely going to save you some hassle. First off, stay away from the Crux Cub-15, which is the camera I'm currently holding in this video. When I first purchased this camera, I thought it would be perfect because the profile is so small that in my mind I thought I could hide it under the lip of the front bumper and the lip of the rear trunk, but the angle is just not sharp enough and it's staring at the ground. This camera might work on taller vehicles, but where the Corvette sits so close to the ground, it's just not a real option. The other problem is that the camera is designed to move inside of its housing, which initially I thought would be a benefit, but it turned out to be a negative because what I failed to realize is that the Corvette is a very rigid vehicle, and every time you go over a bump, that camera moves. So again, definitely keep the Crux Cub-15 away from your C6. The next camera is the Boyo VTK601HD, and this is a good option. I like this camera. It has a good angle on it. It has more angle than the other 2 cameras that we're talking about in this video, and you can clearly see things when you're parking, like curbs, and when you're pulling into your garage. You can pretty much put your car in the exact same spot every time. The picture's really nice, and it really judges distance well. But it does have a drawback from an installation perspective that I'm going to talk about. Now, you don't notice this camera when you're standing next to it, but when you're at eye level with it, you notice that it has some screws. And the screws that came with it didn't leave me feeling very confident that it was going to keep the camera attached to my vehicle, so I replaced them with some small bolts. The problem with this from an installation perspective is you have to be able to get to the back of those bolts in order to tighten down the nuts. And because of this, I had to remove the grill to my car, which is an additional step that's kind of a hassle. So from an installation perspective, this isn't the easiest camera. This camera is going to stay on the front of my vehicle, and I do recommend it as a good option, but the next option's better. Next is the Accele RVC1150T, and in my opinion, this is the best camera for both the rear and the front end of your C6. The first thing you're going to notice about it is just how small the profile is. The next thing is the nice angle on the camera. It's going to be good for both the rear and the front end of the car. It also has a keyhole design, which makes it really easy from an installation standpoint, and once installed, the camera doesn't move. One thing I want to touch on is that because of the keyhole and the trunk open button on the lip of the rear end of the C6 Corvette, it can be hard to center mount a camera. Just keep in mind that you can take the backup grid lines out of the camera so that it doesn't look funny if they're not centered, and with some head units, you can even adjust those grid lines to put them back to center. You can adjust the lines on the Sony head unit I'm running, but honestly, I just didn't like the way it looked, so I took the grid lines out. However, I did leave the grid lines on the front end of the car because it helps me judge distance from a curb. So there you go. If you want a camera that'll work for both the rear end and the front end of your C6 Corvette, that has a small profile, a great picture, and an easy install option, the Accele RVC1150T is the one you want. I hope that helped. Now let's get right into this install video. We're going to start with the camera on the front end of the vehicle, and we're going to have to drill a hole through the firewall so that we can run the camera cable, and that hole is going to be located right behind the battery. So the first thing we need to do is completely remove the battery by removing the bolt and the plastic wedge that's holding it in. Okay, we got the battery out, and from looking underneath inside the cab of the car, I think the best place to put our hole is right where this circle is. So there's a circle, and right in the middle, just punch right through there. We're gonna do it with a really small bit first before we do the large bit, and see what the other side looks like. And then if it's the right spot, we'll enlarge that bit. I recommend you take out the kick plate located on the passenger side of the vehicle underneath the dash so that you have a better idea of where your line is going to be coming through the firewall. To do that, you need to take out these two plastic rivets. This is supposed to be one piece with a bend in the middle, but as you can tell, as I remove mine, I break it into two. I've got a slick fix for this issue that I'll show you in video number 4. If you want to avoid potentially breaking yours, just use a trim removal tool. The one I had was too big, but I know they sell smaller ones that would work here. And be careful not to just pull this second piece away because it does have the floor lighting in it and you don't want to pull on the wires. One thing I want to point out is this group of stock wires coming through the firewall right here. If you look in the engine bay, this is the same group of wires right here. So if we're going to drill through the firewall here, then on the inside of the vehicle, you can tell that this group of wires right here is going to be sitting in front of the hole. But don't worry, there's enough space to get the wiring through behind this group of wires, but I point it out because I don't want you to push the drill bit all the way through and snag any of these wires. With that said, let's go ahead and drill our hole through the firewall, and like I said, we're going to start with a small bit and then step it up gradually with bigger bits. Again, try to avoid pushing that bit all the way through and snagging any of those wires on the inside. Here's a shot of the wiring that we're going to use to run from the back of the head unit to the front camera. And as you can see, I already have a spade connector hooked into the video power line. This is going to plug right into the aftermarket wiring harness located behind the head unit that we spoke about in video number 2. And on the other end of the line, you're going to find the black wire that needs to be grounded to the chassis of the vehicle, and I'll show you where we're going to ground that right now. Okay guys, I nearly forgot to show you the run on the cable for the front camera. And I wanted to jump in now and do that because I felt like I did a pretty good job with the rest of the video, but it was kind of lacking in that area. So I wanted to correct that. The other thing, I guess the positive note is, you can tell my car is not always as dirty as it was in these install videos. And I just got this thing ceramic coated and it's beautiful. They color corrected issues in the paint and I couldn't be more than happy. So looks good. So I just wanted to show it off for a minute. As far as the run on the front camera, I wanted to point out the ground post. So there's the ground where we grounded the front camera, and that's where we kicked it through the firewall. And you can tell I got the hole a little bigger, and that's because there may come a day after I'm done doing other things to the car where I want to upgrade the entire system and not just the head unit. So I wanted that hole a little bigger, just kind of some pre-planning. So not that the Bose one sounds bad, it actually sounds pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it, which is why it's not my first priority. So, but later on I might want a little more. But after it grounds, it kicks into this automotive cable right here, and it just kind of follows it right to the front grill. And then you'll see the camera I ultimately ended up going with right there, and we'll get into that more in this video. And there's some cable sticking out from my camera that I need to get tucked back up there a little better, and I'll do that too. But there's that. And then I also wanted to show you another grounding post inside the motor bay, and that's right here next to the alternator. So there's 1, 2, and I'm going to show you a third one for the backup camera that we used on the back end of the car. And the reason I point those out is there's not many on this car. There's not a lot of metal, so that might be handy to know where they're at. So I think that'll correct that issue. Oh, one last thing. Once it kicks through the firewall, the cable gets tucked up underneath the dash under that kick panel, and I'm going to show you how to take that off in this video too. So you'll know what I'm talking about, and then it just runs straight to the back of the unit and plugs in. So that's the front camera as far as the path I took for the wiring. Let's get back into the rest of this video. So if you're going to use the Accele camera that I recommended at the beginning of this video, this is how you install it on the front of your C6. First, we're going to start out with a really small bit so we get a nice hole started, and then we're going to step up the bit until we get to a hole saw bit, and we're going to use that for the final hole for the camera. This is the same process for the installation of the Crux camera that I told you to stay away from, which is what I'm installing in this video, but this was prior to me finding the Boyo camera and it being a better option. I'm also not going to replace the Boyo camera with the Accele camera because the work's already done on my end, so it doesn't make much sense for me, but like I said, your best option is that Accele camera and it'll save you a lot of work. So after you get your hole drilled, you just feed the wire through, orientate the camera, and push it in where you want it. Using this as an example, you can tell why I like the Accele camera so much more than the Boyo camera from an installation perspective. It's a lot easier just to drill the hole and push the camera in than it is to remove the grill of the car. And that's it for the front camera. From here you just route the wires and ground the camera like I already showed you, and then we'll get into plugging it into the head unit in our next video. Okay, now we're going to use the same type of wiring setup in the same way to run the reverse camera. We're going to start out by routing some wire to where the back of the head unit's going to be, and then we're going to remove this trim piece, and we're going to route that wire heading towards the rear end of the vehicle as we tuck it into the carpet. Okay, listen up, because I am about to save you a huge pain in the when you're running this rear view camera. If you think you're going to find a grounding wire in the back, at least on the convertible, good luck. So I've been playing around with this for entirely too long. So here's where your ground wire is going to be. You're going to take that one off, that piece of plastic, and you're going to take this upper seat belt piece of plastic off, and then you're going to take that side piece of plastic off right here. And you're going to find a grounding point right here on the interior of the door. So I had to run my wire back this way so that I could get to the grounding wire, the black wire on this, and it's going to ground right there. And then I'll feed the rest of this back, and I got enough room that I can plug it in right about here. Of course, I let go of the wire and it went the other way, but it's going to be sitting right about here, plugged in to the camera, and then grounded right there. So, trust me, that's probably where you're going to want to hit your ground, because you're not going to find a lot of grounds back there unless you find one I'm unaware of, but I've been pulling up carpet and putting it back in and not seeing anything that's hooked to the frame. So, here it is. You're welcome. Okay guys, right here I'm just going to strip back the ground wire, put a ring connector on it, and then ground the camera right to this post I showed you. Right here you see me taping up the red wire on this end of the cable, and that's because we don't need to connect it to anything at the rear of the vehicle, and we don't want it to arc out on some metal, so we just want to ensure that that bare wire is covered. The other end of this red wire will be connected behind the head unit in the wiring harness to the purple and white wire, and that's the reverse wire. So when you put the car in the reverse, the camera will turn on and interrupt the screen. Okay guys, when you're running that back camera, you might want to just open up your lid for your convertible halfway, just so you have an idea how to run your lines, and just so you're familiar with the mechanics, so that you know when they go up and down, they're not going to grab that line. So for me, I'm running them on the passenger side of the car. My line came through right there. I got an idea how these... That kind of just fell on me. I got an idea how these mechanics work as I say that. So I'm going to pull this carpet back and run this line. If you unscrew this, you'll be able to get that carpet off. And just make sure that that line's getting ran under all these mechanics on this side and on this moving hinge right here. Make sure nothing's touching, and then I can kick it through. Okay, so you can see the path I'm taking. I came in from by the speaker in the back seat, well, back seat Corvette, in the back, and I'm just following this wiring harness, and I'm zip tying it to that wiring harness because obviously the mechanics aren't touching that. And then I came under this metal bracket, came right through here, and I'm just going to continue to follow that path all the way to the back and make sure I get under this and find a place where this isn't gonna come down on it. So when I'm done, you won't even know it's there. I think it's a pretty good option. Just showing you these steps so you got an idea. Here's a shot of the carpet back in and the line plugging into the backup camera. And you can tell I put some electrical tape on them just to make sure those lines didn't disconnect. Now let's get into how to install the backup camera. There's two plastic nuts in the back of the car that hold the storage net that you need to unscrew. And there's two plastic rivets that you need to pop out. From here you can pull out the carpet from both sides. You don't need to completely remove it because you're just trying to see behind it, but you do need to remove two plastic rivets from the middle near the trunk latch. Because the rivets were slightly indented in the carpet, I couldn't get my tool behind them, so it was easier for me just to grab the carpet and pull it forward, and the rivets will come out with it. From here, just put some thought into where you want your camera mounted. Keep in mind how long your cable needs to be, and then go ahead and drill the hole just like we did on the front end of the vehicle. I'm using a large zip tie to pull my camera wire through, but you can use whatever's handy. Just take the end of your camera wire and tape it to the zip tie or whatever you're using, and then you can pull it through from the other end, and I'll show you where we went through the other side. On the inside where we pulled the carpet forward, you'll see a rubber grommet. All you need to do is pull this forward, and then you'll see where the zip tie came through. Now you can put the carpet back in just in the opposite order that you took it out. Just make sure the camera line is hanging out so that you can plug it into the line that leads to the head unit. It's pretty easy to do. You just pull the carpet forward on the driver's side of the vehicle, and you can plug it into that other line. I also failed to show you that I did push the rubber grommet back in that was behind the carpet, and in order to get the camera line through, I just took a razor knife and put a small slit in that rubber grommet, and that's how I passed the line through. I made the slit pretty small, and when I pushed the camera line through, it was super tight around the line, so I don't really have concerns about it leaking. And that's a wrap for video number 3. Make sure you check out the next video, video number 4, which is the last video in this series, where we wrap everything up. We're going to install the Bluetooth mic. I'm going to show you the best place to put your GPS antenna so it's just not stuck on the dash. We're also going to install an aftermarket USB-C port, and we're going to install the door chime for the vehicle. With all that said, this is Nick with Idaho Up, and until next time, keep up.